Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, Britain and the EU have declared Sunday to be the final day to agree a Brexit deal, setting the stage for a dramatic final act of negotiations. I'll be discussing all of the fallout with political activist Femi Oluwole, Chief Executive at International Marketing Partners Limited, Alison Stewart-Allen, and author and political consultant Mazi Godson-Azu will be telling us what Brexit could mean for Africa. Then later, Britain's NHS launched its biggest vaccine campaign this week, with the Pfizer-BioNTech jab administered at 70 hospital hubs around the Isles. I'll be speaking with Dr. Philip Idayawo about this monumental turning point in the fight against the pandemic. But now, over to our first topic, Brexit. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the European Union's chief executive Ursula von der Leyen gave themselves until the end of the weekend to seal a new trade pact after failing to overcome persistent rifts over a lively dinner on Wednesday evening. The European Union wants to give Britain access to its single market of 450 million consumers, but they insist conditions for that access must be fair and have still not been met.
I had a very long conversation yesterday night with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. It was a good conversation, but it is difficult. We are willing to grant access to the single market to our British friends. It's the largest single market in the world. But the conditions have to be fair. They have to be fair for our workers and for our companies. And this fine balance of fairness has not been achieved so far. Our negotiators are still working, and we will take a decision on Sunday.
We need to be very, very clear. There's now a strong possibility that we will have a solution that's much more like an Australian relationship with the EU than a Canadian relationship with the EU. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. There are plenty of ways, as I've said, that we can turn that to the advantage of both sides in the conversation. There are plenty of opportunities for the UK. But yes, now is the time for the public and for businesses to get ready for January the 1st. Because, believe me, there's going to be change either way. There'll be change whether it's a Canada-style deal or an Australia-style deal. But we certainly now need to make proper preparations for that Australian solution.
With just 3 weeks to go until the end of the transition period, public fatigue is at an all-time high. According to the latest polls, if the referendum was taken today, Britain would remain firmly in Europe. To discuss this and more, I'm now being joined by Femi Oluwole, a political activist and co-founder of the pro-European Union advocacy group Our Future, Our Choice. Femi Oluwole, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. A recent YouGov poll revealed that support for Brexit in the UK is at its lowest point since the referendum. Some of our Nigerian viewers may not recognise you, but in Britain you definitely are probably one of the most prominent Remain campaigners. When you look at polls like that, how does it make you feel? Do you get a sense of kind of I told you so?
A little bit, because I've known this since December. After the referendum, you had arguments between Leavers, between the Brexit side, about what Brexit they wanted, and there was never any sort of consensus as to that. There was never going to be a majority for any specific version of Brexit. In fact, at the election, 2 out of 3 pro-Brexit parties opposed this Brexit. Nigel Farage said that even given a choice between this Brexit and Remain, Remain would win. That's the arch Brexiteer. And in that election, 52.7% of voters chose parties whose manifestos committed to a second referendum. So the public has already rejected this process. It's
been a long 4.5 years, Femi. Longer for some of us that are in the news or on the telly as much as you and I are. But of course, COVID has completely gripped the world. And for some people, Brexit is still a foreign term. It takes a lot for it to trend on Twitter in the UK. How has the pandemic changed your reality of Brexit? Have some of your fears heightened? Are there new fears? Are there new concerns?
So in 2018, the British Medical Association, which represents UK doctors, said that a no-deal Brexit would make us more vulnerable to, quote, deadly pandemics. That was in 2018. And we've seen since the referendum a significant drop in relative terms of EU doctors in our NHS. And now we're facing issues about supply chains in terms of getting the vaccine into the UK. So a lot of the things that we were warned about with Brexit are coming true, and that realization is actually being sped up by the pandemic. Not to mention I've already heard a government minister give the impression that if we can't get the drugs into the UK, it's the EU's fault, which is one of the things that scares me the most about Brexit. The idea that if we haven't realized that we're doing this to ourselves, it's going to be painted as if EU countries are doing this to us. And given everything that's at stake, given the lives that are on the line, if the British people genuinely believe that the people who die as a result of this is because the EU's chosen to attack us, that's a very dangerous road to head down.
It is a really dangerous road. What do you think about Trump's removal from the White House? We've got President-elect Joe Biden, not a big fan of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. In fact, I think he's referred to him as a mini Trump. Do you think that is going to change the way people perceive Boris Johnson's global Britain next year?
Well, there's a very real possibility that at the end of this year, we're going to end up with no deal with Europe and no deal with America, which means we've essentially cut off free trade from half of the global economy, which isn't exactly global Britain. As for what it means for UK trade, Joe Biden has said that he won't give us a trade deal if it means compromising the Good Friday Agreement, which means that basically there's no trade deal if we don't stay closely aligned to the EU, which means that Boris Johnson's entire plans are gradually going up in smoke.
Just lastly, before you go, Femi, it's unlikely, although never say never, 2020, right? It is unlikely that there'll be a second referendum. We are going to be coming out, whether we crash out, whether it's hard or soft at the end of this year. What are your plans next year going forward? Are you still campaigning?
Well, unfortunately, Brexit just creates more work for me. It means that the next few years are going to be around Brexit. It's going to be the realization. I mean, there are 5 facts that prove this is going to be an unending nightmare. 1, all countries do most of their trade with countries that are close by. 2, that means that the EU will always be our main market. 3, the biggest barrier to trade is having different laws. 4, that Brexit means that we no longer have a say over the laws of the EU. 5, that means that for the foreseeable future, UK will be trapped in a choice between following the rules of the EU but not having any say in them, which will annoy Brexiteers, or intentionally making ourselves poorer permanently, and those are our choices.
Gosh, those choices seem pretty stark. The only thing I suppose we've got to look forward to is Christmas. Femi Oluwole, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Thank you. More Brexit talk now, and despite much talk of a new global Britain, Donald Trump's departure from the White House could leave the United Kingdom out in the cold for the foreseeable future. US President-elect Joe Biden is famously ambivalent about Boris Johnson, describing him as a mini Trump. Does Brexit signal the start of the UK's reduced influence? Let's ask Alison Stewart-Allen, Chief Executive at International Marketing Partners Limited and author of Working with Americans. Alison Stewart-Allen, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Observers, economists, they've been saying it was a last-ditch attempt to get a Brexit deal. This week, it really feels like it is. I've got to ask you for your opinion. Do you think we can get a deal within the next couple of weeks?
I think we can get a deal in the next couple of weeks. I think the appetite of British business to ensure that there is stability, predictability, and clarity is essential. And it isn't just me and my clients saying this. There are a number of business bodies here in the UK who are extremely concerned about the ambiguity that's prevailed for the last 4.5 years around Brexit. The fact that it is down to the wire now with a matter of hours to negotiate a deal that is in the interest of the British economy and protecting jobs, I think is very surprising to everyone. There has been all this lead time, doesn't appear that much progress has been made. If fishing rights is the true bone of contention, then I find that, and I think a lot of business people find that extremely surprising. There's got to be more to this story than fishing rights.
Absolutely. We're hearing all sorts of different issues that have come out of negotiations over the past couple of weeks. But of course, COVID-19 has completely gripped the global economy. It's completely put everything on a standstill. Brexit almost seems like a completely foreign term now. Do you think post-Brexit, Britain will still have its international standing, or have they completely isolated themselves from the rest of the world?
Well, it's certainly a risk. I mean, the UK being the first to get the vaccine and to begin the COVID vaccine rollout, I think is an attempt to salvage its global reputation. The fact that you had senior government ministers talking about V-Day yesterday is, I think, an attempt to try to make up for lost ground and the likely reputational risk that will accrue from Brexit. An island nation of 66 million people compared to the population in Nigeria, it makes this place a very small economy, relatively speaking. And therefore, it's highly dependent on trade with the EU, trade with the United States. And I think it puts Britain in a pretty desperate situation to firm up trade agreements with both trading blocs to be able to economically attempt to weather the storm that COVID has certainly amplified. So I think the UK has a lot to learn. I think it has a lot to do. And I think they better get going.
Absolutely. I've got to ask you, of course, Alison, about America. We've now got President-elect Joe Biden. America, Britain, of course, have had these long-standing political and military ties. Trump and Johnson seem to have a close relationship. Joe Biden has been pretty critical, even about the referendum result, notably about the Northern Ireland Protocol. We know the internal market bill has been slashed now. But how do you think their relationship will evolve over the next 4 years, seeing as if the world has tilted? There is a new world order, isn't there?
There is a new world order. I think it's going to be a pretty strained relationship, if I'm honest. Biden is certainly no fan of Boris Johnson, and he's made it very clear some time ago that he sees Boris Johnson as a mini Trump. So given the domestic agenda that Joe Biden has on his hands, not least rolling out a vaccine in the United States, not least trying to prepare and return the American economy to what it was pre-COVID. There's lots of infrastructure investment required for roads and bridges and hospitals. There's healthcare reform. And widening the net to include more Americans. There's the DACA legislation to protect those that arrived in the United States as children, have grown up there and are yet to become citizens. So, Joe Biden's domestic agenda is pretty packed. And for him to necessarily want to put priority on a deal with the UK, I'm not so sure that's going to happen. Frankly, I think the deal is more likely to be done first with the EU on trade. It's a bigger trading bloc. It's 477 million people. It's a much larger economy and a much larger prize, if you think about it, for US companies than the UK might be. So I'm not very hopeful about Biden wanting to sew this up in the very near future.
That big trade deal that Trump spoke about perhaps is on the bottom of the list. Well, time will only tell. Alison Stewart-Allen, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll be continuing this Brexit discussion by asking author and political consultant Mazi Godson-Azu what's in it for Africa. Plus, Dr. Philip Idayawar joins me to discuss the monumental inoculation of Britain's most vulnerable earlier this week. See you after the break. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Later in the show, I'll be speaking with Dr. Philip Idayawar about Tuesday's monumental COVID-19 vaccine rollout in Britain. But first, more on Brexit. Since the start of the transition period, Britain has made it clear that African countries are a prime target for renewed trade relations. And the UK has already announced deals worth nearly £8 billion this year alone. Mazi Godson Azu is a political consultant and author. His new book covers this precise topic, and he joins me now. Mr. Mazi Godson Azu, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. At the beginning of the year, a Forbes article was pretty bold in saying that Africa was the billion-dollar Brexit winner. Then COVID, of course, took grip on the world. Do you think that's still the case?
I think I do tend to agree with Forbes' research outcome with regards to the potential benefit of the Brexit situation come next year, 2021, with regards to African relation with Britain and the rest of the EU. I think looking at the outcome of the last UK African Investment Summit, which was held here in January and hosted by the Prime Minister, which opened a lot of doors for so many African countries. About 20 head of states attended that event, and many of them went home as a gainer with regards to millions of pounds of deals that were signed by the Kenyan government, the Ugandan government. Even some states in Nigeria got some little change after the summit from that summit. Well, looking at what Forbes is saying, I think Britain going global will tend to open up a lot of closed, unintentionally closed economic and investment outlooks that Britain has overlooked because of its membership of the EU. And right now, they'll be looking at how they can independently and unilaterally make a good new case with African countries in terms of export and import related trade deals, and also with regards to the advanced innovations in technology and infrastructural capacity development, which UK is trying to bring into the trade negotiations with African countries. We know very well that Africa is the hotbed of every human and natural resources in the world. As we can all understand, Africa is the second largest emerging economy in the world at today, and that being the reason why China is doing all it can to stamp its place in Africa in terms of making an inroad as much as it can.
Sorry to interject there, but I do want to come on to China before we run out of time, because I know you've discussed a lot about post-Brexit Britain's relationship with Africa in your new book, which I know you're releasing next year. But can Britain reverse some of the lost gains? The latest statistics show that the trade between Britain and Africa in 2018 was $46 billion. The same year, trade between Africa and China was $204 billion. It almost feels like Britain can never catch up, or is that not the aim for Britain?
I think it's going to be very difficult and very challenging for Britain to reverse that particular economic disparity between its competitiveness with China at the present moment in terms of the economic gain, the financial gain. One thing we have to understand is that China is a huge manufacturing hub in the world. Most things are manufactured in China today, unlike Britain, where virtually 0% are being manufactured in the UK for export purposes. And I saw China is leveraging on its export capacity in terms of household and common goods that can be easily used in Africa.
Mazi Godson Azu, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Thank you. To other news, these are the history makers, the first people in the UK and the world to receive the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine outside a clinical trial. People aged over 80, as well as care home workers and NHS staff, have been given the first batches as the mass vaccination programme is rolled out nationwide. For more on this, I'm now being joined by Dr. Philip Idayawo. Dr. Philip Idayawar, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. I know you're a busy man. I can see you in the hospital there. What a monumental moment it was on Tuesday morning. A 90-year-old British grandmother being the first person in the Western world to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. Can you just summarise how much of a historic and monumental moment that was in the fight against the pandemic?
It is massive. Thank you. And I mean, we have to recognize the fact that what the world of science have been able to achieve with the creation, the development of this vaccine is absolutely monumental. It takes years to develop a vaccine. Here we have a situation where building on past knowledge and building on strong foundations in science, within months, the medical world has been able to come up with a vaccine and delivered it to a person. And I think that having that old lady come forward to present herself to have this vaccine, I think that it's huge service to mankind for our benefits, all of us. And we really have to be grateful to everyone who participated on Tuesday to having this vaccine, considering all the conspiracy theories out there. I think that we all own every single person who came out on Tuesday to participate in this vaccination real time. We owe them a world of praise and thanks.
We absolutely do, and I agree with you there. There is so much misinformation. Usually when you talk about fake news, it's political. I have never seen so much, I wouldn't say anger, but really fear. And, you know, there are some pretty high-profile, prominent people. I've got friends, I'm sure as well, Dr. Philip, you have friends that are completely against the vaccine. Why do you think it is? Is it fear, or is there something more sinister behind this?
I mean, I just think that what we have witnessed since the arrival of COVID-19 has simply been the situation where the underlying causes of mistrust between citizens and governments just came to the surface, boiled over. People no longer trust government. I think that is the bottom line of what we have been witnessing. This is the reality. And I think that science should always be respected and separated from politics. This is what the world leaders need to begin to emphasize. Science is about facts. Science is evidence-based. And medical science, you know, without medical science, we will not be where we are today. We know the destruction of lives that has resulted in the past. Millions of people dying because basically the world of medicine just was not at that pace. Now we are able to do it.
I can't let you go without asking a really important issue, and this is about distribution in Africa. Oxfam recently released a report saying they expect 9 out of 10 people living in the world's poorest countries to miss out on a vaccine next year. 9 out of 10, which means the majority of people. There are about 300 vaccines doing the rounds at the moment in various stages of development. Will it get to Nigeria? Will it get to sub-Saharan Africa someday?
It definitely would, Juliana. We will have to be hopeful. But I do not think that the Pfizer vaccine in its current state, we can't access it because of the technology required for storage. But I think that what the Oxford group has done will be, you know, available to people in the sub-Saharan, less developed economies. But we need it. We are losing people as well. A good number of our high-profile middle-class individuals who are exposed, you know, traveling around the world, are catching this virus, especially, and many of them are dying. So we need it. We need it in Nigeria, definitely, but not. I don't think that the Pfizer variant is something that we're able to afford. Not because of the cost, but because of the technology required.
Absolutely, it's that sub-zero temperature refrigeration, isn't it? But we've got doctors like you and exceptional doctors around the world and in countries, so hopefully we'll get our own vaccine sometime too. Dr. Philip Idayawar, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. Sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.